Just sat down, had an amazing conversation with Rob Campbell. Rob Campbell is one of the most decorated chairmen and directors that we've ever seen in this part of the world. But studying economy, like he was an economist that got into the unions, I guess, by accident.
And I found myself on national TV defending this.
How did you defend that? So many amazing stories he shared, but he's also been in the business world, in the capitalist world, but he speaks about the difference, right? And understanding that you can still be wealthy and give back.
Someone asked me the other day, do you believe in capitalism? I said, believe in it. I've seen it working.
He speaks about being the chair of Health NZ and everything that he saw wrong with that place. And I asked him, when did you think things were going to be harder than what you thought going in?
They didn't like the emphasis on Māori health that we were putting in, which in my view was far too light, but in their view was far too much.
You might have heard a lot about Rob Campbell, but in this interview, you're going to learn a lot more. We take it right back from his days in Upper Hutt to where he is now at AUT.
10,000 people leaving school this year with no qualifications. It's a disgrace. What do we think is going to happen to those young people?
Such an amazing man, a wealth of knowledge. And trust me, you're going to learn so much from this conversation. Everything from politics to economics. Rob Campbell, enjoy. This podcast is made by the amazing team at Fanaticals. They put up with me, so they're pretty epic. Rob Campbell, thank you so much for joining me, bro. How's it going?
Oh, it's great. Well, can't wait to get into it.
Yeah. When did we meet?
We met at Sky City at a cocktail party, actually, raising money for a South Auckland charity. Not your one.
Not my one, yep.
Yeah,
My River, I think it was.
Yeah, My River, yeah. Which was a good charity, guys doing good things. And I had helped them by arranging the evening at Sky City to do a fundraiser. And you were there. We met talking to Kevin Mialamu.
Yes,
who was
great Kevin Mialamu.
Yeah, Kevin's great. They were auctioning, I think, about the 10,000th All Black shirt that Kevin had worn.
Yeah.
And that's where we met.
Yeah. And that was back, when was that? 2000?
Must be nearly 10 years ago.
It's been a crazy ride.
Yeah.
I didn't really know of you. I knew you were the chair of Sky City when we met, getting to know you over these years and understanding everything you've done. As my Claude AI agent said, your career is a gold mine, but...
Where's the gold? Where's the gold?
How do you go from being, working in an anarchist bookshop to then, I guess flipping, and going really heavy into the commercial world? Do you want to take us through, where you started growing up in Featherston, born in Featherston, was it?
Yeah, born in Featherston, but most of my childhood was in Upper Hutt. Te Whatu Ora, it's called now, but it was called Upper Hutt very much then. My family's very much an Upper Hutt family. I went to school down in Lower Hutt because the school there had a better first 15 than the one in Upper Hutt did at the time. And then went to university at Wellington.
Yeah.
And I guess got radicalised, if you like, by the environment in the late 1960s, early 1970s, which was, the environment to be in at the time was a radical one for young students, and that had a big impact on me, yeah.
Yeah, because you actually studied you were an economist.
Yeah. I was going when I went. I thought I was going to be a lawyer, but that didn't last beyond the first year. And then I studied mostly economics, economic history, and political science. But and joined when I graduated. Joined the staff teaching actually economic history, but in the economics department.
Yeah. And what was the environment back then, bro?
Well, it was very different. There were no fees. Students didn't pay any fees. I had a bursary, which most people got just by being basically in the sixth form, which helped with living expenses. So it could hardly be more different to the experience that students have today. I was also helped because in my first year I applied for a special scholarship that Wellington Newspapers was offering, and I applied for the scholarship and got it, which was I forget the number, but it was was quite generous, and part of the deal was you had to go and work for them in the holidays. And so I was thinking vaguely at the time of being a journalist, but in between getting the scholarship and the holidays, we had a demonstration outside the newspaper's headquarters, which turned into a bit of a ruckus.
Yeah.
And they decided that they preferred me outside the building than inside. They couldn't get out of the scholarship, so I never had to fulfil my side of the bargain. Yeah. It was quite a handy start.
And you're talking about being radicalised. What do you mean?
Well, it was a very political environment at the time. You know, the anti-apartheid, anti-Vietnam War issues were very prominent, and students around the world were very prominent in those. So it was a very active political environment to be in. Again, quite different to today. There wasn't the pressure in those days to have assignments in so much. So it was a much more free-thinking kind of period of time at universities. You know, if you had an active brain, you were likely to get involved with it. We had great fun. I was remembering the other night one stunt that we pulled. There was a National Party club on campus, and a group of us decided that we would attend the National Party AGM on campus. It was actually a branch of the National Party, which we did and took it over, and elected ourselves as president and vice president, secretary, etc., and then issued a press statement calling on the workers and peasants of New Zealand to unite and overthrow the government. And, you know, eventually the National Party decided that wasn't quite their taste. But there were lots of, you know, those sorts of things were going on, and it was great fun to be involved in, but it also was a time of having the ability to think deeply about issues and get involved in social issues was very much part of the university environment, which I think regrettably is harder for students to do now because they're all working, got so much more to do, it's so much more pressure on them.
Yeah, there is a lot more pressure now just to survive, you know, and help your family survive.
So we had to make our own pressure in those days by doing other things.
I remember you sent me some clips of you on the front line and protests, and I think you sent me one around the South African tour.
Yeah, well, I mean, there'd been a long history of resistance to sporting contacts with South Africa right back to early days, and you know, I think it was in 1960 when I was only 9. There was a major fight back against the fact that Māori couldn't join the All Blacks to go to South Africa. The South Africans wouldn't have them. And then they relented a little bit, and I think it may have been Brian Williams, and if it was someone else, please forgive me, whoever it was, but I think it was Brian Williams was made an honorary white to join the All Blacks and go to South Africa. So people kind of forget how tough that regime was on the Africans in particular, but even that level of racism was inherent, and so there was a big No Maoris, No Tour protest, and that gradually grew. It was based amongst civil groups, but the unions were quite prominent in those kind of civil society movements. And then by the time around the world, campaigns against particularly rugby teams, but any South African teams were being banned from sporting competitions around the world until they got rid of the vicious apartheid regime. It came to a head naturally enough over a Springbok Tour in 1981 when there were mass protests against the idea of it arriving, and then when the tour did arrive, there were virtually pitched battles in the streets around a number of the venues. The game at Hamilton was actually stopped by protesters invading the pitch and holding the pitch to halt the game. On the day that happened, as I recall it, I was in a group that managed to block the motorway coming into Wellington simultaneously, and can still recall hearing on the radio that the game had been stopped, and at that point we all thought the tour might actually be stopped. In the end, the tour did concluded at Eden Park with pitched battles around the streets surrounding, and a chap called Marks Jones flying a little plane over, dropping bags of flour on the pitch while the game went on. But it was a very fraught time. It was a very divided society over that issue. Quite for a young person, quite exciting as well. But it was certainly quite confrontational.
Mm. Have you ever been arrested on those front lines?
I got arrested once in my union times on a picket line in Wellington, where I punched the employment manager for a cleaning company. It was a picket line for the cleaners union protesting against their low pay, and this chap deserved a hit and he got one.
It's crazy when people will be watching this and see the chairman of so many things talking about your punching someone on a picket line.
Yeah, well, I mean, things change over time, obviously, but I'd been a union involved person in a leadership position for the Distribution Workers Federation at the time, and on the Federation of Labour National Executive. In fact, I was on the National Executive of the Labour Party at the time too. Anyone worth their salt holding those positions has to be prepared, in my view, and it's still my view, and it hasn't changed all my life, that if you're in a position like that, you have a responsibility to stand with the people wherever they are and take some risks that go with that. And I mean, I never took any really very serious risks from that point of view, but you do have to be prepared to stand by people. It's not just a photo opportunity. You've got to be prepared to do what they are doing and what they are putting up with. And so that was just an example of that.
I wonder if there's any footage of that punch. Was there any cameras around when that happened?
I don't think there were cameras around. I know there was sound of it because in my defence, we actually used the sound recording to prove that a guy had been calling out that he had been kicked in a particularly sensitive area by this guy that I physically remonstrated with. So there was that was a Radio New Zealand recording.
Yeah. How did you get into the unions?
In a lot of those protests at the time, unions were a factor of the groups. They weren't dominating the protest groups or the civil society groups, but they were actively involved in it. And so I'd met a lot of unionists in that context, and it was particularly after a anti-Vietnam War protest, after-match function, if you like, was at the Panama Hotel, which doesn't exist anymore in Wellington. And we were having a beer with a group of people who were from the drivers' union, led by Pat Kelly, whose daughter, Helen Kelly, was later president of the FOL and a very prominent and very effective leader in her own right. But Pat and a group of the drivers' union people were complaining about going into their wage negotiations, and at the time I was working at Massey University in the economics department, and they were saying that all that really happened was they'd go to the wage negotiations and say prices have gone up 5%, we need 5% to stand still, we need a 5% wage increase. We'd go along and they'd say that, and the bosses would say, we can't afford it. And they said, we don't know what to say after that, except for various expletives. And we're talking away about that, and sort of armed with probably a few beers, I said, that's easy, easy to prove that these guys can afford it. And people are looking, who's this guy, And so Pat said, well, can you do some work on that, knowing that I had some economics background? And I said, yes. So I went away and did a sort of a very short research piece on the road transport industry, and then got asked to present it to the union, and the union said, that sounds good. Why don't you present it at our wage negotiations? So next thing you know, I'm at the wage negotiations. And it was, most of the work was actually around Freightways, who I subsequently became a director of some years later. But that worked reasonably well, had an effect. And then I was asked to do the same for the Federation of Labour. They had a regular hearing at what was then called the Arbitration Court for what was called a general wage order. People don't realise this now, but there actually was a mechanism for people to argue for a wage increase across the board for workers. And they would go and argue it, and the employers would argue against, and there'd be there was an arbitrator that made a decision about it, a court. And so this was quite a major hearing, and so I became the person inputting into that. Eventually, when I later on became the advocate in those situations, but initially just as the kind of expert person brought along. So that it all came from there, and then the PSA actually funded me to leave the university and come and work in Wellington for a group of unions, and that's where it started.
And you rose quite quickly through the ranks, right? You were, union heavy in the end.
Yeah, I did put on weight, but look, I was in the leadership position. I mean, it was a very active time. That was really the time of the Muldoon government, and there was active repression, not just against workers, but against lots of parts of society. So there was a lot going on, and there was a recognition amongst the unions that in addition to their traditional organising skills, they did need some levels of expertise. And I just happened to be the person. I wasn't the only one, but I happened to be one of the people at the time who was available and around. And so it did create a situation where I probably rose to a leadership position more quickly than would previously have been the case.
Yeah.
And that had benefits as well as disbenefits on it.
What were the disbenefits?
Well, the disbenefits was that I wasn't really from a working class, or I wasn't from a working class union background myself. So while I had a lot of heart for the cause, I wasn't, if you like, of the working class, and so that was, I think, a disadvantage. While I managed to communicate pretty well at rank and file stop work meetings and those things, and that's where I learned my speaking skills really, it was quite different to the language that many used, and I found it hard to sometimes communicate. There's a story about that actually, but I'll tell you the story then.
Yeah.
So we were in Auckland at a store workers union meeting, and in those days there were storemen packers then they were called, and the guys at the meeting were people who were working in freight forwarding yards, and I suppose there's 200 or 300 guys there, and a lot of them were gang members. Some sites would be mainly Black Power, some would be mainly Mongrel Mob, that sort of thing. It was quite a tough environment. But anyway, the unions at the Federation of Labour level had decided that there should be a claim in all negotiations for jury service leave, and people didn't get paid. There wasn't such a thing. And nowadays there is for many people, but there wasn't then. So anyway, I started to explain this, and a guy at the front stopped me and said, "Robbie," yeah, mate, "Robbie, hands up everyone in here who's been on a jury." We looked around and there's nobody, not a single hand went up. Yeah. So, "Robbie, hands up everyone who's been up on a charge." And predictably, fairly large proportion of the team were in that category. So he said, "So, Robbie, what you've got wrong is we don't want jury service leave. We want court leave for when we're up on a charge. We should be paid for that." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah." Well, it didn't matter what I thought. It was carried by acclamation, and someone managed to put out, from the employers, I think, actually put out a press release saying these crazy guys now want to be paid every time they're up on a court charge. And I found myself on national TV defending this.
How did you defend that?
Well, we were a democratic union, and the workers decided what it was they thought was important and wasn't important, and it wasn't for me to tell them what mattered, and so we were prepared to advocate that. We didn't win that particular claim, but I didn't feel that uncomfortable about it once I thought about it.
What was like one of the craziest stories that you've had on, dealing with, representing the union and a big company?
So many stories. Some I probably don't want to that much talk about, but I remember on one occasion with that same group of people, although down in Wellington, we had a strike over pay negotiations, and the guys decided that the way to best move it along was that we would auction the containers. So anyone that wanted their container released, any employer who wanted their container released, could pay us, pay the union. And a bit like the Strait of Hormuz today, you could move. I hadn't thought about that till just now. But you could move your container, and it actually was a pretty effective way of winning the dispute, auctioning the containers. Yeah, so that was sort of one relatively amusing thing, but some of the others were things probably nobody really needs to talk about anymore. But they were quite exciting days for a young person, but tough days, and I learned an awful lot about how economics worked outside the textbook.
Yeah,
which was very valuable. And also how business worked. So,
what was your biggest learnings from those days?
My biggest learning probably was how important people are and how powerless individual workers are against the power that an employer has. So one of the slogans of the Wellington Drivers Union, which was the first one I joined, was organisation is the only weapon of the working class. And I have always recognised that, and still do recognise that people who talk about equality and equity and opportunity and all these sorts of things ignore the fact that there is a vast difference in power between substantial employers and an individual employee. And the way the individual employee can gain some strength is through combining with other employees, other workers, and at least using that power. I'm not saying you have to gather together on every occasion, but that power can be used to set rules that provide fairer treatment for workers. And I think, over the ensuing decades, a lot of that was done, and a lot of it has subsequently been ripped apart. Things like the strength of the personal grievance clauses come to mind, where they're individual things, but the fact that there were personal grievance provisions and procedures that gave rights to workers were won by organisation of workers. They weren't, an employer didn't wake up one morning and think, gee, it's time I gave my workers a fair go. Why don't we provide this?
Yeah.
It happened through worker organisation, and then individual workers got rights, which have subsequently unfortunately been weakened a lot. So that was one lesson. The other big lesson I learned there was it derived from a chap who was a communist drivers union official before I joined. I never met Chip Bailey, but Chip was a leading unionist, and the phrase that was always attributed to him was, when you're in a negotiation or in a discussion, you should listen carefully to what the person across from you is saying, and then think about why they're saying it. And it's when you think about why they're saying it that you start to learn how you should react. And that is something that I've carried subsequently into business and political and other negotiations. I still remind myself of when I hear someone say something, listen, what are they really saying first? Not usually what the words are, but what do they really mean? And then why are they saying that? Because once you understand why they're saying it, you've got a bit of a clue as to how you might react, what it is you're actually dealing with. Yeah. And it was a union negotiation thing I learned that's been applicable in a lot of parts of life. I still use it today.
I need to think of that before I react. But how did you go from there, bro, and then into the commercial capitalist world? Because I know a lot of people, it upset a lot of the union people when that happened.
Yeah, it did, and I understood then, and I still understand why it did. So as we've covered, I was involved not just with the unions but with the Labour Party, and the Labour Party at the time, partly through the kind of Douglas reforms, but also partly just to implement their broader social policies, which people shouldn't forget actually did do a lot for people as well. So there were positives and negatives to the Lange-Douglas government, in my opinion, without doubt. But one of the things was they needed people who were sympathetic to the Labour Party, empathetic to the Labour Party, and wanted to appoint them to boards in various places. So one of the ones that I was invited to sit on was the New Zealand Post, when they were establishing these things as SOEs, state-owned enterprises. I was kind of a reasonably obvious candidate. They actually coupled me with Ron Briley at the time to put me onto the board of the Bank of New Zealand, and he was the sort of the right-wing person. I was the left-wing person to sort of get it through the caucus. It was put up in that way. So I became involved in that level of public governance. I was on a thing called the Economic Development Commission at the time too. There was quite a number of them, which kind of dragged my interest away more from the union field to, if you like, that sort of initially public governance field. To be fair, and I don't talk about this a heck of a lot, but to be fair, I really went through a pretty much a physical and mental breakdown at the time too. The pressures of the union and political activity had got to me, and I wasn't coping with it at all well. So effectively, I needed to break from that simply because I really did have a physical and mental breakdown. And I could do this other sort of work, but it wasn't nearly as pressured as the hard work that the union people were doing on the front line. So there were two reasons. A, my interests shifted and were tweaked by that stuff, but secondly, I needed to shift anyway.
Yeah. Because the pressure, as you know, working in the community, it's immense, eh?
Oh, yeah, look, I had at the time, I still have immense respect for the people that take on roles in unions and, they've got we're all different people, but the union work today is very tough and very demanding, and I've got enormous respect for the people that take it on. Yeah. And similarly, now unions are a whole lot smaller. A lot of the similar type of people are the people who get involved in social action activities around unemployment, around homelessness, around all the various social issues there are. Mm. They're the sort of people who probably previously would have gravitated to working in unions, now working in various forms of community action organisations. I could envisage you, Dave, if you got involved in a job, you've got an entrepreneurial streak too, but equally with your sense of social justice. In those days, I could have seen you getting involved in a union activity and taking it on with the same kind of heart and brain you apply to the things you do now. So it just wasn't that difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you would
pay
have
us
been,
this or
you would
we're
have been dangerous.
walking.
You would have been real dangerous.
We're shutting it down. Pay us or we're shutting this down. We're never yeah. Did you feel like when you're in these corporate spaces, in these boardrooms, that you were like trying to change things from within?
I initially was sort of a learner, I've got to say, but I'm not a very patient person. You might not have noticed that, but I was keen to make make changes. I probably focused on issues like transparency, like changing the nature of boards, having more diverse representation on boards, those kind of governance issues, because that was the area I was working in, became intense interest for me, and I kept that up through my kind of governance experience. But it's fair to say I also did get fascinated by the way in which the commercial world works, the economics of it, how success is achieved, and even in the financial structuring, capital markets side of it, became a very strong intellectual interest that I had, and it fascinated me, and I still do hold a high interest in that, recognising both its strengths and its weaknesses. Probably more its weaknesses these days than its strengths.
Yeah, and you said, you're a big, you're always questioning and around, CEOs' pays and and keeping things fair and understanding where, the difference between what the lowest workers getting paid and what the CEOs are getting paid. How did that affect you when you're seeing the differences, the gaps?
It did annoy me, and I think it still annoys me. And in fact, it's in many respects those gaps have got worse again recently. I think they didn't for a while, and I think there were some areas of progress being made. I think they're probably perhaps widening a bit now, but it's just an element of unfairness, and for whatever reason, I do have a streak of not liking inequities and feeling that people should get a fair go, which I don't think they get. So that's carried through in how I've thought about things. Look, it's inevitable, my views, spending so much time in that governance level of business, my views obviously softened in some respects about that. They never disappeared, and a lot of the same things annoyed me, and I had often intense arguments about these things with fellow board members, but you'd be a fool to say that you weren't affected by it in some ways. I mean, my view about what my living standard ideally would be obviously changed by being involved in those environments. So I understand why some people think that I sold out of, if you like, from initial things. I never felt that I did. And I still think that there's a great space for people who are doing well in business or in other parts of life financially to not resile from that, but to see that they are privileged and to use that privilege to help open up opportunities for others. The thing that really annoys me is not people having money, but holding on to it, and not being prepared to share it with other people. We shouldn't have these wealth disparities, but they're particularly pernicious. They're particularly bad because so many people want to hold on to their wealth. Like this opposition to wealth tax at the moment. I just can't understand. So you've got, without going to specific numbers, you've got people saying we should have a wealth tax of say 2% on over 10 million spare cash. Now, the people with 10 million spare cash, if they paid 2%, are still getting richer. Well, if you've got 10 million and you can't make more than 2% off it each year, you can do that by putting it in the bank. So you don't have to be very bright. And if you've got 10 million, you get many better opportunities than that. So you're pretty ordinary if you can't make, say, 5 or 7% off it. And if the community takes 2% off it, you're still getting richer. And why are people opposed to that? Why would you? How greedy do you have to be? Not just do you want to hang on to your 10. No one's taking the 10 off you. This is an argument that you might want to.
Yeah.
But just taking the 2% off it, it's minimal. And so that's the kind of attitude that I think our society's got to get over. Or to quote President Obama, if we don't, there will be pitchforks. People will come and get it if people allow this inequity to go on the way it's driving at the moment.
Why do you think? I mean, we see it a lot, right? We're, in the places we move in, and we see a lot of wealth. We see a lot of people struggle, and that's what I guess gets me down, gets you down so much. When you see how much struggle's out there. I was talking about being at Spark yesterday, and a guy couldn't pay his phone bill. Old man, So it was like, so I paid it. It was I said only $150, but only for me, not to that guy.
If you haven't got it,
yeah,
you haven't got it, yeah. And as we were at that boxing match the other night, and the guys climbing into the ring, nearly all brown. They're not climbing into the ring because they think it's a good idea to have a fight on Saturday night. They're climbing into the ring mainly because that's one way they can make a bit of money and gain a bit of mana in society and those kind of things. And, as we've remarked on, white men in suits sitting there watching brown men hit each other.
It's a bit like that movie, The
I
Django.
admire the sport, and I love the gladiatorial part of it and all of that and the courage of the people involved. But, that is all over the world what you see. And if the privileged don't acknowledge it, then they will reap a whirlwind. In my view, a few years ago, Bob Geldof came to New Zealand, and I was fortunate to be invited to
But Dave Higgins brought him over?
dinner one. Yeah. Yep. And I still remember very graphically Bob Geldof with a group of business people saying the difference in the world now is not that there are rich and poor. I'm not entirely right about that because I think rich are getting richer, poor are getting poorer is an issue. But his thing was, the difference is that they've all got these, and he pulled out his mobile phone and he said, in history, they really haven't been able to see the difference. Now they're holding it in their hand. And he was saying at the time, you'll find they're going to come and get it. And what's happening in Europe today, what's happening in many parts of the world today, the fact that people can see that their desperation is not matched by other people. In fact, the people who have more are actually trying to hurt them quite often, and they can see it. They've got the phone; they can see it. They're not. They're not going to put up with it indefinitely.
Yeah, that's what frustrates me. Is that I think the more money you have, the more people you can help. And the other thing is, you talked about the sellout thing, because I've often get called a sellout because I want to make money. The reason I want to make money is so I can help more people. Why do you think that exists here? This whole, if you try and a community person like me that's run this thing, that's helped so many people, but the moment I try and be commercial, I'm called a sellout.
Yeah, look, I think I kind of understand why people feel that way, because people feel they don't have opportunities and they have less opportunities, and they often want to sort of feel aggrieved about the person who is apparently doing well. And I don't think you're getting rich, Dave. You might be getting better off than you were, but you're not getting rich. And I'm not rich in any meaningful sense either. But what I think it does is that it's because we've individualised so much of the stuff. Somehow the ideology's gotten into people that I'm an individual who's poor and you're an individual who is doing things to not being poor, and I don't know how to do those things. And I understand why people feel that way, but it's that individual isolated mentality that's really the problem, as I see it. If people can look around them and say, actually, that's never resolved. It's not resolved by this one person getting rich or this one person being poor. It's only resolved if we as a society decide collectively we're not going to have it. We have a bigger common interest that we are going to promote. And if we can promote that common interest idea rather than I'm going to be better off and that person's not going to be better off, if we can promote the common interest idea, that's the key to that. We've lost that in this whole individual thing that life's all about the individual and the individual family, be they rich or poor. I mean, the issue that of a family that's rich actually isn't to do with that family. It's to do with the fact that they've accumulated extreme wealth and they're not sharing it.
Yeah.
And the system that allows them to do that, the system that not just allows it but actually encourages that to happen, a system that encourages people to not have any money and actually creates a situation in which they don't get opportunities. That is the problem. It's the problem. It's the collective problem, the common problem that we need to get people focused on. If we're all just focused on our own issue, that's a rich guy, I'm a poor guy, we'll never get over the problem. It's what we have collectively and how we approach a common good that's the key to it. And so I think actually what you've experienced, and I've heard people say it, is about people who still cannot shake off that individual idea that's how the world works. And if we can change that around and get people thinking about the common interest, we will quickly see that actually we don't need billionaires. This idea that we tax people and the billionaires will go away. Well, they might, but their billions won't necessarily go anywhere.
Yeah. When you became Health NZ chair, or Te Whatu Ora, man, talk us through that. Because when you got that, I was like, yes, finally, BBM's going to get some support. But it actually made it harder for us, because it was that you actually had to step down from our board. There's that conflict of interest stuff, and it actually made it harder for us to get anything because me and you were so close.
Yeah, it wasn't crooked. No, that's right. For me, it was a bit of a cycle. When I was approached to take the job, I didn't apply for it. I was approached by the government to take the job. It was obvious to me that I needed to step down from a number of other roles, and Sky City was one of them because there are issues with gambling.
Yeah.
I only need to say that no health issues with gambling. There are, and so that was obviously going to be a problem. And I needed to get out of other commercial roles. But I was happy to do that because I thought the Te Ora legislation and what the government was planning to do at the time could make a serious difference. And I thought, well, you've been off on this other track for quite a long time. This is an opportunity to really get firmly back on the other track. And it happened to be coincident with being asked to chair the Environmental Protection Authority as well. So given that I'd always retained a strong interest in environmental issues, I thought, well, now this is now an opportunity to sort of really give something back. And I had high hopes for the change that we were going to achieve.
When did you start realising that the high hopes you had were not the same as what the actual government wanted?
Probably at the first meeting I went to, because it was pretty obvious that the general idea had come from the health workforce and from the community, the various communities, but the specifics of it were being implemented by highly paid, quite isolated consultants. You weren't likely to get a much more equitable health system by paying people millions of dollars to tell you how to do it.
That's crazy.
So that was a problem right from the start. I think the second thing I realised was that there wasn't going to be any very satisfactory answer unless you were even more holistic in the way you felt about health. For example, excluding accident compensation from the coverage of the health system made no sense because it was such a big part of the flow of money and such a big part of health and wellness in the community. And that was an issue. The way in which Māori health had been ring-fenced, while Te Whatu Ora was an important idea, the way in which it was being ring-fenced and constructed was actually not transferring much power to Māori communities. So there were obviously things that were going to be difficult right from the start.
Yeah.
And we were those of us who were involved with similar aspirations were aware that these were difficulties. They weren't new.
Yeah. When you were let go, talk to us about that.
Well, there'd been a developing strain between me and the politicians over emphasis on equity, and
they didn't like you talking about equity?
No, I was told specifically to stop talking about equity so much and focus more on efficiency, which I don't think the two are all that different. And so I was very focused on efficiency as well. But that clearly became a political issue. They didn't like the emphasis on Māori health that we were putting in, which in my view was far too light, but in their view was far too much. They didn't like the emphasis on public health. I fell out with the then minister over there was an issue that came up. Chloe Swarbrick had introduced a piece of legislation about local availability of liquor stores. And I talked to our public health specialists about it, and they all said that was a great piece of legislation. That was exactly one of the things we needed for better health.
Yeah.
And so I said so at a business meeting, actually talking to business people in Taranaki. And the government was very unhappy about it.
And this is the Labour government too.
It wasn't their idea.
Yeah.
I never got to work in health under a national government. I didn't get that far. There was the Labour government backsliding on what the Pay Ora legislation was all about, so-called Chris Hipkins' so-called policy bonfire. And there was also, it wasn't just political, there was also a phalanx of managers in the health system who were not really keen on losing much of the power that they had as ministry or management people in Te Whatu Ora. They didn't want to share any of that power with unions or with clinicians or professional groups. So there was a tension there as well. So I was probably on a fairly sort of narrow ledge for a while. In the end, they found an excuse to get rid of me.
What was the excuse again? What was that around that?
Well, the excuse was they said I called Christopher Luxon stupid, which I didn't actually. Whether or not it's true is a different question. But I didn't call him stupid. In fact, I said he had rescued his party from stupidity, which was Maureen Pugh saying that climate change didn't happen. And he had told her that wasn't true, so he'd done that, but I said, but despite that, he was exercising a racist dog whistle over the water reforms. Now, water reforms were very important and are very important to health, as the people who are currently having to boil their water can tell you.
Yeah.
I considered it a health issue, still do. I considered it important to speak up on that. They said that you couldn't do that because I was a public servant, and the government's policy was not that. That was not government policy. Well, that's actually a stupid argument. When you create things like Crown entities, the reason you create them is that you want them to have some level of independence from the ministries, and you appoint a board and bring in people from outside because you want them to be that. If you wanted public servants to do it, you've got hundreds, thousands of public servants you could use to do that role. You bring in people because of their outside expertise or experience or whatever it may be. You can't then bring them in and say, oh, by the way, you're a public servant, you've got to do what you are told, as if you're a public servant. So the whole idea is a stupid idea. From my point of view, it was quite shattering and difficult, but only because of what I felt we were not achieving.
If you had the opportunity to go back, if you were offered the job, what's the one thing you'd change? The first thing you'd change?
They have to make sure that the governance of the organisation is actually independent, and not that the government can't make its policies and all those sorts of things, but the actual running of the organisation has to be independent. The ministers are far too involved, this government and the previous one, far too involved in management kind of things, so they would have to agree to do that, and they would have to agree to a much stronger involvement of the workforce in making the decisions through their unions and professional organisations. This is not just an old unionist reminiscing, but through their workers' organisations and their professional organisations and the community activists that are involved. They've got to give them a lot more power to actually make decisions, and that's actually also the same key to the Māori health issues. So there's quite a lot that I'd want to change. I think at the moment they're trying. You can't improve the health of a community through their hospitals. You've got to improve the health of a community through what the community does day by day. So you've got to have a much greater emphasis on public health. You've got to be prepared to say to commercial interests who are promoting ill health, which they do every day in their sales programs, if you allow people to do that and then whinge about the costs of picking up the pieces, that's really not how it goes. So since I was in that role and now observing what went wrong, what still goes wrong, my views about that have got even stronger. So I think, having said that, I've ensured that I won't ever be asked to pick.
Why do you think all governments, why do you think they struggle with understanding to fix these issues? Because there's already groups on the ground doing the mahi with next to no money. Why do they struggle to invest properly, not just with scraps, but properly invest with multi-year sustainable funding to help the group grow and to impact more people?
I used to have a copy of a cartoon, which was a king sitting on his throne, and he's reading a bit of paper, and in the first bit he's saying, "Do I really want all this power?" And then in the second frame he's saying with a grin on his face, "Yes, I think I do." And I think that's how people who get into power do think, Dave. They don't. They all talk about we're going to devolve power, but they don't actually mean it or do it. And they find it frightening when they do. When it looks like a particular community is getting powerful and is doing its own thing, they find that particularly threatening. I mean, I think the people active in Hōora Māori now are really still showing that, despite Te Whatu Ora being shut down and other moves that have been made. Really successful operations are going on in Māori health, run by Māori, run by iwi Māori partnership boards and other organisations, which are a big challenge to the way the old health system runs.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why not just the politicians, but the other people that manage in the health system don't really like it. So you've got people defending old ways of doing things, people who like having power, people who can see an opportunity to make money, and then you've got the rest of us with our health not improving.
That's so true, eh? Now you're with AUT, Chancellor of AUT. How's that going?
Well, I love it. I mean, I think AUT is a university of opportunity. It has been from its inception. The way it thinks about education, the communities it draws on, it has a strong emphasis on, and has always had a strong emphasis on, equity and opportunity, a place where talent meets opportunity is one of the slogans that we use, and I think I know it's real. So that's a great opportunity to be involved in it. It's also a place of excellence in terms of its research and teaching quality, right on the edge of, cutting edge of, because it's a university of technology, right on the cutting edge of what's happening. So it's a fantastic opportunity to be part of. Universities are partly a business, partly an educational organisation, but they're also partly communities.
Yeah.
You know, nearly 4,000 staff, 28,000 students in various ways. They're big communities, incredibly diverse communities, with quite a strong, common feeling around that. Education matters. The phrase we use at the moment, slogan we use if we like, is knowledge that works.
Yeah.
And that just resonates so much with me as to what we need, and it's a great opportunity to contribute in that area. And it takes me back full circle as well.
Yeah,
to
I was just saying that.
University, you know.
Yeah.
I can pretend I'm a student again sometimes.
It's been a crazy journey, bro. Like, you know, starting from the union days, you know, getting into the commercial capital world. I don't know, is it the capitalist world? What would you?
Yeah, no, it was definitely. I was, I was fortunate to be at quite high levels of the capitalist world, and to see how it works and to understand how it works.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when I'm talking, I mean, sometimes people think I'm shooting my mouth off without thinking, but the truth is worse than that. I have actually thought about it and usually know something about it. So
yeah.
I do have a good knowledge of how capitalism works because I've seen it. Someone asked me the other day, you know, do you believe in capitalism? I said, believe in it. I've seen it working.
Yeah, and that's why I think that, like, you know, when we met, you know, and I think, you know, then you turning up, training outside at our boot camps, and it's crazy because only at BBM would you have, you know, patch gang members all turning up to train along with the chairman of Sky City all together, united and on a common cause. You know, those were the good old days.
I remember the group you sent me at actually at Papatoi.
Yeah.
The first night I came out to one of the sessions, and you said, go over that group over there, because there were guys that were sort of not as young as some of the people in the particular group. Anyway, I get over in this group, and I was the only one that wasn't wearing any jewellery around my ankle.
I always think like that was maybe the reconnection of you into the community. What was your thoughts when you started, you know, at the grassroots with us at BBM when we didn't have anything? We were literally training outside or in school halls, church halls.
Yeah, no gear. Look, I did feel it was like a reconnection for me, very much so. You know, it reinforced that I had kind of done my thing at that sort of business level, I didn't want to turn my back on it or anything of that kind. I'm still actively involved in a number of significant business ventures, and they're important to me, and I enjoy them. But it did mean it was a reconnection, and I considered it a privilege, and I still do. I was very privileged to be accepted, for example, in the Wellington Drivers Union when I was a 20-year-old university teacher. Very privileged to be accepted into their work and lives. Similarly, now as an old guy, you know, it's always a privilege when you do. I've just completed a thing where, fancy name, but patron of a limited service volunteers group with 90 rangatahi doing a 6-week course to assist their opportunities for unemployment from very disadvantaged situations. And, you know, I loved it. And what I loved was the privilege of being accepted into this group of young people and to be able to share a bit about their lives and hopefully to say a couple of things that weren't ridiculous to their minds. So, you know, I think they're much bigger privileges than things that you can buy with money, or you know, there's no ticket you can buy to that sort of life experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, say, people like you and me, it's one thing what we can say to people about their situation who are disadvantaged, But it's equally important, or more important, what we can say to the privileged, and keep saying to the privileged, you know, you have to learn to share, you have to learn to do more, you have to learn to give up some power.
Is that what you say? Because I remember, you know, you've gone to, you've worked for a lot of some of the richest people in this country.
Correct, yeah.
And you've gone to them, as we do, with our cap in hand, asking for support. And most of them haven't, right? And it's a lot of the times they just want to support things that get their name on a building. What would you say to people about that have that kind of money in terms of sharing it?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think they have a responsibility. So that's the way I pitch it. And you know, you've been fortunate, or you've been wonderful. Don't really care which you think it is, to have this position. But having it, your responsibility is to share that and share, you know, generously. So that doesn't solve society's problems, but I think in the meantime, it's something that it's reasonable to say to people. And you know, if frankly, if they feel guilty for not doing it, then good. If guilt makes them give, then good. But the real answer has to be to share power.
Yeah.
You know, most people would not have homeless people. If you ask the world as a whole, New Zealand community as a whole, do you think it's good to have homeless people? They would say no. Do you think it's good to have people with really low levels of income, which they have at the moment, so they need to go to food banks in order for their family to survive? They would say no. So if they had power, they would organise so it didn't happen. We have enough resources in this country so those really bad things don't need to happen. So it's about power. If the community as a whole had power, we would not be doing the things that we're doing. We would not have 10,000 people leaving school this year with no qualifications. It's a disgrace. What do we think is going to happen to those young people? What? Nobody would deliberately set out, and the community as a whole wouldn't set out to do that. Yeah. We would actually do something about it. Now that might mean that we shift some power away from something that maybe we don't build an LNG terminal, but we have a better system of looking after our young people. There's big number of things I'm throwing around. There's lots of those choices being made all the time. And so we have to change the power in our society away from the things that suit the really rich to the things that suit the really poor. And you know, there's a lot to be done. But you know, they say, oh, everyone can't be equal. Yeah, well, let's not argue about that, because we just want to be a little less unequal. Be a good start. Let's move with that and see how we go. We're not in any danger of all becoming equal in this country or any other that I can see.
Yeah. Last question, Bo. I ask every guest that comes on, what's your why? What's your purpose? What keeps you going?
I'd like to say it was some high purpose. For me, it's not. It's curiosity and interest is the thing. If I'm not, I've just got a brain that if I'm not interested or curious about how something works, then I probably won't keep doing it. So honestly, that's probably the thing that moves me along most.
Yeah.
If, for broadcast, I might say, oh, I've got this deep and abiding sense of blah, 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 or God or whatever, but it's not. Truth is, is it really interesting and challenging and something that makes me curious? Yeah. And that's the things that I work on.
Awesome. Well, thankfully you find our stuff interesting and a lot of the other stuff you do. So I appreciate you, brother, and thanks for all your work. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, man.
Awesome. Thank you so much for watching, team. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And if you got something out of this, if it's helped you or someone you know, please go down to the link below and buy us a coffee. It's hard to keep this going, but we must. So please help us to help you. Let's go.